Hello, and welcome to the Divorced Dadvocate, divorce support for dads, where we help dads create a healthy and less traumatic divorce. My name is Jude Sandoval, and I'm your host. I created this podcast and the Divorced Advocate community as a result of my own high conflict divorce, and because you as a dad deserve all the resources necessary to thrive through this challenging time. I encourage you to check out our website at thedivorcedadvocate.com, where there are resources that correspond to this episode, as well as free access to our membership community, where you will find live meetings, free workshops and courses, private discussion groups, and more. And now, on to this week's episode. Hello, and welcome to the Divorced Dadvocate. My name is Jude Sandoval, and I am your host. And you are in the place where we help dads create a healthy and less traumatic divorce. That is what the Divorced Advocate community is all about and why we created it. Today, we are going to be talking about, are you a nice guy? ? And we're going to talk about that in the context of being a nice guy is basically being codependent. And so we're going to talk about defining what codependency is, describing what codependency is, and then some simple steps that you can take to stop being codependent or reduce codependency, because that runs on a spectrum. But before we get into it, I just wanted to remind you that the divorce quiz is still up on the website, an awesome tool to help you gauge where you're at in the divorce process compared to others who have gone through it. It takes about 10 minutes, and it will give you some immediate results in 5 different categories of where you're at. And if you'd like, you also have the opportunity to chat with me for free and interpret those results or talk about anything that you've got going on with your divorce. So check that out. It's at the website at thedivorcedadvocate.com under the divorce quiz tab, or you can go to it directly at thedivorcequiz.com. Hope you'll take advantage of that. All right. So I first want to acknowledge the excellent article that Alicia Munoz has written about this, from which I'm basing this episode on, and that is How Do You Overcome Codependency, a Therapist's Guide. I will link that in the show notes below and give her credit because it is very well written. And if you want to see the full text of that, I highly recommend reading that, because that's what we're going to base what we're talking about today. Now, on our meeting last week at the group meeting, we had some conversation around being nice. And if you haven't heard that meeting, it is the last episode that we recorded, our introduction to the Divorcing Dads group meeting. It is a fantastic conversation from the men that showed up at the group, shared quite a bit. There were quite a few things that were shared, questions that were asked, support that was given by each of the men. And if you haven't listened to it, take a listen. And I would love for you to jump on one of our meetings. It's absolutely critical to get involved and stay with people in and around you that are going to help support you through this process. And that's why we structured these group meetings. But in this particular meeting, we had a conversation. We were talking about being nice and being a nice guy. And what being a nice guy is essentially a form of codependency. And so let's just quickly and briefly define what codependency is. And it's a relational dynamic where you over-rely on others and their approval of you. You have a hard time experiencing yourself as distinct and separate from others, and you struggle to recognize and prioritize your needs. So that's pretty technical. this shows up where your partner's well-being becomes fundamentally entangled with your well-being, and putting attention on your partner's real or imagined reactions and responses feels safer and easier than putting attention on yourself. And this can make it hard to set, respect, and recognize your own and others' boundaries. Now, codependency and this dynamic, and it is a dynamic, because what will happen is your tendency to be a nice guy or codependent works with a dynamic of somebody that would be on the other end of the spectrum, which has a less ability to put somebody's needs first and think about giving, and is more potentially a taker than they are a giver. So this can show up in a dynamic in a relationship as getting along or keeping the peace. And I hear this very often from the dads that I work with, that I just want peace. I just want our family to be happy. I just want it to be a good place. I just want it to be an environment that is conducive to everybody's joy. And sometimes that's a noble goal, dependent upon how you go about reaching that goal. And the problem with not setting limits and just getting along is oftentimes you're not thinking about stating your needs or setting the boundaries around those, which not only is bad for the relational dynamic that you might be in with your soon-to-be ex or your current spouse, but it sets a very bad example for the children that are watching and that you're modeling for, as to what a healthy relationship would look like. So if one person is overgiving and one person is overtaking, that then shows your children that is a healthy dynamic. And while you know that that's not necessarily the case, and you may not want to be doing that, and you may be just trying to keep the peace, you are absolutely setting an example. So when we talk about this, and we're going to talk about how this works and what this looks like in a brief example here, just know in working through this, and as difficult and challenging as it may be to undo some of these tendencies and thought processes that you have, that you're not only doing this for yourself, but you're also doing this to help stop potentially what is a generational pattern that continues through multiple generations, because that's all you've known, that's all your parents have known, and that's all your children have known. I know that's that was the circumstance with me, and we'll talk about a little bit later on how this is something that you learn, and it's a pattern of behavior that you learn potentially psychologically through childhood. But first, let's talk about a quick example of how this might work and how codependency works. And that might be where your spouse or your ex comes to you and has something that they want to do, say want to go on a trip. And they say, well, they have all of these reasons why it's really a great time to go on a trip, and why you should go on a trip, and why the family should go on a trip, et cetera, which might make perfect sense. However, you know that potentially that this is really bad timing at work and financially, and that might put a strain on the family's finances. And your spouse is saying to you, well, let's just do it. This could be a really great opportunity for us with the kids, and has all kinds of.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey, this is Jude with a quick reminder about the Divorced Advocate Foundation for Fathers, which is our nonprofit that helps dads through divorce with legal education, free or reduced cost coaching, and mental health resources. If you own a business or know someone who does, there's an easy way to help by connecting credit card processing through our partner program. Part of the fees go straight to the foundation with no added cost to the business, and 98% of businesses are actually able to save money on their processing fees. It's a win-win. So if you know a business that accepts credit cards, get them in touch with me by sending a warm introduction email to jude@thedivorcedadvocate.com or give me a call directly at 720-255-1021.
Reasons why it would be good, except that you know that this probably does not feel comfortable to you and you need to say no, except that in order to keep the peace and make things smooth, you agree to do it. But when you walk away from the conversation, you feel uncomfortable knowing that this is potentially going to place either a burden on yourself or on your family financially. You know that at work, this is maybe not going to fly if you need to take time off from work or whatever it may be. And you just don't have a good feeling about that. So if you recognize this in some of your conversations, you're not alone. This was most definitely myself and in my marriage, in the mindset of a happy wife, happy life, which is a terrible, terrible philosophy from which to live and be in relationship with somebody, because it does not take care of or honor your needs or boundaries that you may need to set. Now, on that note, let's talk about some different ways in which you can stop being codependent. And again, these are going to be some brief pointers and tips that you can take a look at and start to do some self-analysis about and self-reflection with. And if you want to get into this deeper, and many of the men that I do work with, many of the men that come to the group meetings recognize this. And then we talk about, there have been many, many meetings where we've talked about this in the past, about how we are able to learn to state what our feelings are, what our needs are, and then set healthy boundaries, how to communicate those in a proper manner that is respectful and as well as true to what it is that we need. So this is where it gets into then developing your tool belt around how you're able to do this. But these first tips that we're going to talk about from Alicia's article here are going to be really helpful in you starting to kind of see and maybe just have the awareness of, oh, wow, this really is something that I'm recognizing in me, that I see are tendencies in me. The first one is put your codependent tendencies in context. And what do I mean by that? So firstly, just have compassion with yourself about the fact that you may have gotten into a codependent, you can call it a codependent loop. You can call it a codependent dynamic or a relationship. Again, like I said, this is something that takes two people. You will find, if you start to recognize this in yourself, in your personal or romantic relationships, that it also carries over into every area of your life. It will rear its head in your professional relationships, with your family, even with your children, if this is a dynamic that you have brought one half to. So it doesn't mean that you're weak or that you're flawed or you're somehow failed. And it just means that you have figured out a way to, it's like relational survival. You've figured out a way to survive relationships in order in order to get along, in order to, sometimes it may have been, and this is where it comes into it being a psychological function that you may have developed from your childhood, in that this pattern of merging with others may have offered you the safest way to get through your childhood. And I know for me, that was how I developed this. So it wasn't like at one point in your life, you just said, hey, you woke up in the morning and you said, hey, I think that today I'm just going to start developing this massively codependent nature, and I'm going to overly give of myself, not be able to prioritize my needs, and overly give all of the time. So I know that wasn't my case, and when I came to that realization finally, it was hard because I felt bad, and I felt down on myself for that, and it took a long time to understand that it wasn't necessarily my fault. Now, when I say that with an asterisk, which is now when you do recognize that, and if you do choose to continue this this dynamic or this behavior, then you are making the conscious choice to be codependent. But if you did not know that up until the point where you had this self-awareness, this self-realization around it, then it's not your fault. It wasn't my fault that that pattern developed for me in my childhood and early adult life until I was made aware of that dynamic and those behaviors. And then it was incumbent upon me to do something about it. And so the rest of what we're going to talk about is how to do something about it. And this is a process, and doesn't happen overnight. And there isn't an end goal in sight. You're not just going to stop. I still have tendencies years and years after knowing and being aware of this and doing the work. It runs on a spectrum. You may be massively codependent right now, and then years and years down the road, you may be less so, but you may see that crop up some of the time, depending on the relationship or the dynamic or the situation. It's just being aware and having an awareness around how you are predisposed to react to things. So let's talk about a couple of more steps, actually a few more steps. We're going to go through about 7 steps. The next one is practice acts of smart selfishness. And like I said, this falls on a spectrum. Codependency falls on a spectrum. So honor your needs, wants, and feelings for the long term of your relationship. Many of these, many of the same behaviors that might be called codependence are very kind, are very pro-social, and like I also mentioned before, and the other end of the spectrum with whomever you might be in relationship is going to be, it's like a magnet, right? It takes some opposites to attract. In this dynamic, the relational dynamic that you may be in, it's going to take somebody that does not have those same kind, pro-social, thoughtful tendencies to be somebody that might be a taker more than somebody like you that is an overgiver. So just start with some of those small acts of selfishness by looking at taking the time to look at and identify yourself and in what it is that you need. And that takes us to the next step, which is get to know your true needs. First, in doing that, you need to distinguish what your needs are from fear and avoidance. And why is that? Because fear and avoidance may be something that has been a tendency that you've gotten used to in order to please the other person, because you're afraid of the fact that they may not approve of you, that you may disappoint them, that you may upset them. So if you're doing stuff based upon that, take the time to stop and think about what your needs are in any circumstance. Like the example that I gave you of the vacation, are you doing it because you are fearful that you're going to disrupt the family life, that you know that you're going to get the cold shoulder, whatever that may be? Or are you doing and making a decision based upon what it is that you actually need? So that's the first thing you really need to do to determine. And that really takes slowing down, soothing yourself, checking in with what you really need. And it's okay to postpone conversations sometimes. So, and I'm speaking to this specific example, but this can also be in any part of your life. If you need to postpone conversations, it's always, and this is a challenging tool to utilize sometimes because it leaves things in limbo. And that is making a statement potentially like, let me think about that, or I'm not sure how I feel about that. Let me get back to you. Those are always good phrases that you can use in order to be able to stop. And especially in the beginning, when you're still learning these tools and trying to do something on the fly, these are really good tools to allow you some time and opportunity to go back, reflect, take the time, and do what we just talked about, which is distinguish what your true need is from whether or not you're being fearful or you're wanting to avoid doing something or having a tough conversation or making a difficult decision. So again, those phrases are, I'm not sure how I feel about that. Let me get back to you. Or I'm not sure. Let me think about it. Those are perfectly acceptable to have. And if somebody's pressuring you to make a decision, that's a red flag that they're not respectful of your feelings and what your needs are, because taking time to reflect on things before having or before making a decision or before agreeing to something is absolutely perfectly fine. So if somebody pressures you around that might be a sign for you that there's somebody that is not respectful of what it is that you're feeling or the needs that you might have. Next, and this is the next step really in what I just talked about, which is practice clear, direct communication. Directly speak what it is that is on your mind, what your feelings are and what your needs are. And if that is a no, that is a no. No is a great word to have in your vocabulary. If you don't have it in your vocabulary, learn to get it into your vocabulary. Allow people to see more than just the pleasing, peacekeeping, or diplomatic version of you. Here's an example. Are you free tonight? No, I'm not free tonight. As opposed to, well, I've got somebody, I don't really feel that great tonight. Or I have some other commitments. Not being true and honest with what your words are. If you are just don't feel like going out, or you just don't feel like doing something, be very open and clear about what that is. And we talk about, and we've talked in many other shows, and I teach often in some workshops as well as classes, nonviolent communication. And that's just a simple 4-step process of communicating how it is you're feeling, what your needs are, what you'd like to see happen, and then coming to an agreement on how to move forward with that. It is very, very awesome. It will completely transform your relationships, but it's not easy because, and trust me, to this day, it is not easy in doing it on the fly because we have all these tendencies, codependent tendencies, narcissistic tendencies, whatever the tendencies we have that just trigger, that we just learn, and we just automatically have learned to react with in relationships that come up immediately. So some of this is reprogramming not only how you think, but then how you behave based upon those immediate triggers that come up. And so learning to do the communication, the nonviolent communication, and also that phrase that I gave you previously, which is, I don't know how I feel about that. I would like to get back to you, or I would like some time to think about this, is a perfectly good way of communicating too. And so that's just stating your feelings, right? So that would be a very simple step. And then you can go back, you can sit down and you really think about it. And then the next part of that communication is effectively communicating to the other person, going through those nonviolent communication steps, that 4-step process, and doing it, as opposed to just reacting and saying what's just coming out. I promise you, learning to develop that tool will absolutely be phenomenal in your life. It will be phenomenal not only in working with your soon-to-be ex or your ex in co-parenting, but it's going to transform your relationship with your children too. Because like I said, if you're codependent in your relationship with your ex, then you're likely codependent in your relationship with your children, your boss, professional life, everywhere else. The next step is stay in your lane. And you may have heard me in the last episode in the men's meeting chatting about this. And what does staying in your lane mean? That means we can only control what we can control, which is our feelings, our needs, the way we communicate. So when you start worrying about how others perceive you or what they think of something you said or did, you need to remind yourself that you do not have control over what happens in the other person's mind. So you got to trust that the other person, if they don't have the tools, they'll figure out how to resolve their challenges and what comes up in themselves. You have no ability to control how somebody is going to react to what it is that you say or what you do. And it is incumbent upon the other person to be equally as aware and mature in their communication to deal with and figure out how they're going to handle their lane or the other half of the dynamic. And so this is a really, really hard one for those of us that are codependent, because we want to think about and go through all of the scenarios, all of the time. And we're going to talk about that here in a second too, that the stories that we have that we go through and nonstop. And actually, I'll just talk about that right now, because it is the next one. But we have these worst case scenarios and stories that go through our head, and we keep getting in this loop of what might happen, and we waste all of this time and energy around thinking about them, strategizing around them, trying to figure out how we can avoid those or avoid the fear that's going to come up because based upon what we think might happen. Instead, if we just let go of those, open ourselves up to the possibilities that, most of the time, 99% of the time, those aren't going to even happen. You don't even know how that's going to happen or what's going to transpire, that we can be just taking that time to connect better with our feelings, our needs, our desires, and how we are going to, and our values really too, because this comes down to a deeper level of what our value systems are. But then, using that energy and that effort to strategize better on how we would want to communicate those to somebody as well. So stay in your lane and stop with the stories in your head or ruminating over what the potentiality of a conversation is going to be. Just simply, like I said in the first few steps, I'd stop, identify what your need is, make sure it's not a fear or a reaction, and then state and communicate very effectively through nonviolent communication what it is your feelings are, what your needs are, and what you would like to see happening. So those are some tips. Those are some tools. The next one would be nurture your own unconditional self-love. So in this, this is practicing the self-approval and the affirmations is really critical, because what you're needing to do is find a way to celebrate yourself. And because what we've been doing for so long is forgetting about ourselves and just trying to find ways in which we are able to get the love and affection that we're wanting and needing from somebody else by doing something for somebody else. So we never stopped to really unconditionally love ourselves. And so taking time, affirmations are a great way to do this. There is one hack, and I hate hacks, But this is one true hack that I utilize and I can buy into. And I do that by simply listening through the night to positive affirmations that I play. I play them in headphones. It's like a sleep mask that has headphones in it, but you can just play them, because what happens is your brain does not know the difference of whether it's somebody you love telling you this, somebody off the streets telling you this, or the YouTube channel that I'm playing all night long telling you this. So it helps you with your self-affirmations and reprogramming your neurons in your mind to fire differently, to think differently about yourself. It is a true hack, and it is absolutely astoundingly amazing how well it works. So just imagine you're sleeping 6, 7, 8 hours a night, and you have somebody giving you positive affirmations for that entire time. It does wonders. And consider the fact that however many decades you've had these opposite affirmations or non-affirmations going through your mind, it's going to take a little while to reprogram your mind to think that way, to have that unconditional self-love. And so having 6, 7, 8 hours of somebody just giving you positive, loving, self-affirming affirmations is absolutely fantastic. And I promise you will see an immediate impact after just a week or two of doing this. So try that hack. It's about the only hack that I have in my tool belt that is really a shortcut. The last one is release attachment to the outcome. We all have an idea of what we want to happen, except we cannot control this. This is going to require a willingness to tolerate the unknown and live with uncertainty. It is going to require you having faith that life is going to happen how it's supposed to happen, and that you cannot control this. You're going to have to remind yourself your worth and your value don't rest on making others happy, and that whatever happens is going to happen. Now, how can you do that? How can you rest in faith that this outcome is going to be positive for you and that your life is working for you all the time, regardless of whether it feels like or looks like this is a quote unquote negative or bad circumstance? And that is just getting present, being in the present moment. We've talked quite a bit in previous episodes about getting centered, getting present, journaling, meditating, breathing, finding different ways and different tools to get into the present moment. Because if you allow yourself to, again, go into those stories and think about projecting in the future, that's going to create anxiety. Thinking about and ruminating about the past is going to create depression. Staying present is the only way that you can absolutely release your attachment to the outcome and not worry about what it is that's going to transpire based upon the conversation you're going to have or the decision that you're going to make. So if you need tools, connect with me, get on the website, read some of the blog articles, as well as listen to some of the past episodes. And we do a lot of work around this in the Dad's Divorce Blueprint course that we'll have another session coming up here in the next couple of months in getting present and getting in tune to yourself and staying present. So those are some tips. That was the description of, an example of, and some tips of how to get. So that was a description of an example of codependency, which is basically being Mr. Nice Guy. There's also, I wanted to mention, a great book by Dr. Robert Glover that talks about this in specific contexts of romantic relationships. It's called No More Mr. Nice Guy. And like I said, he's very clear, and he defines and gives examples of this in the context of romantic relationships. It's a great quick read. He does a lot of work around this. He doesn't ever mention codependency, but basically what it is he's talking about is codependency. So check out that book too. It's a really great resource, especially if you're in the beginning here. There's also some other great resources that you can get involved with. There's a 12-step group called Codependents Anonymous. It's CODA, CODA. It's all across the country and in places all across the world if you're listening. And they have a 12-step process that is really fantastic and takes you with a mentor through the process to help you with a lot of what we're talking about today, but it's even more in depth. And it also helps you by partnering with somebody. And again, going through this stuff with a partner and somebody that's seen it is really helpful. Don't try to do this yourself. You can do it by yourself. I appreciate that, but I know the first time that I walked into a Codependents Anonymous meeting and sat and listened to everybody talking about some of the things that I just described, the examples that I just gave today. And literally the first thing that I said to myself was, oh my gosh, are these people reading my thoughts? Because this is exactly what I was thinking and how I was feeling. And the next thing I thought was, wow, I'm not crazy. There's other people that have these feelings. So again, if you feel like any of this stuff is resonating with you, and if you're feeling bad or upset about that, that's okay too. But just know there are a lot of people, and it's not your fault. Something that developed over time, likely psychologically through your childhood, that helped you survive, but is just now not serving you in your adult life and in your relationships in your adulthood, in your adult life, and in adult relationships. So I hope that was helpful. Please connect. If you liked what I had to say, please share it with other divorced or divorcing dads. That is like the number one you can do. If you could do me that favor and just whatever podcast platform you're on, if you take that and post it to some social media, that would help immensely. I am the Divorced Advocate is on Facebook as well as LinkedIn, and helping to share that there will help us immensely. Don't cultivate that too much, but if you can help and get the word out with this information, that would be great. Like us, leave a comment, a mention, a star rating as well would help us so much. So thank you so much, and we'll talk to you next week. To hear the rest of this episode and access the corresponding resources, visit thedivorcedadvocate.com and become a member of our community. It's free to join and will provide you with the resources you deserve as a divorced or divorcing dad. Thank you for listening. God bless, and I'll talk with you next week.